I was staying at my friend's house for the weekend. She had gone on a trip with her family, but she asked me if I could stay at her place just to keep her cat company. I didn't mind at all. Her home was a little out in the woods, quiet and surrounded by trees, the kind of place where you feel like the rest of the world is far away. I always liked that. It gave me a strange kind of peace, like I could just breathe and not worry about anything for a while. Her cat, Molly, was tiny and skittish, the kind that hated loud noises. The weekend was supposed to come with heavy rain and storms, and she didn't want Molly to be alone. By the time I arrived, the storm had already started. Thick gray clouds hung low over the woods, and the sound of rain against the roof was constant. The first night passed quietly. Molly curled up on the couch beside me, and I read a book until the sound of thunder lulled me to sleep. The next day was when things began to feel different. Around midday, while I was making myself some tea, the house phone rang. I wasn't used to landlines anymore. It almost startled me to hear it. I looked at the caller ID, but it just said, "Unknown number." I let it ring out. A few minutes later, it rang again. Same number. Again, I didn't answer. But then the answering machine clicked on, and a man's voice came through. It was quiet, almost like a whisper, and all he said was my friend's name, as if he were calling to her. Then silence. And then he hung up. I froze in place, holding the mug in my hand. I tried to reason with myself. It could have been a relative, or someone she knew. Still, it felt strange. I texted her right away to let her know someone had called the house. She didn't reply. I told myself she was busy with her family trip and not checking her phone. That made sense. I pushed it out of my mind, sat back down, and tried to enjoy the day. But the calls didn't stop. Over the next few hours, the phone rang twice more. Same number. No messages this time. Just the ringing, echoing through that quiet little house. Each time, I stared at it, debating whether to pick up, but something in me said not to. By nightfall, I tried to distract myself. I went upstairs to the bedroom, found an old movie on the TV, and got comfortable under the blankets. The rain outside was heavy now, rattling against the windows. Halfway through the film, I remembered Molly. I hadn't checked on her in a while, so I went downstairs. What I saw stopped me cold. She was sitting right at the front door, her little body tense, eyes fixed on the narrow line where the door met the floor, as if she were waiting for it to open. I called her name softly. She looked back at me for only a second, then turned her head back to the door. A nervous feeling started creeping in. I bent down, looked through the peephole, but all I could see was fogged glass and blurred shapes from the rain. I leaned in closer, trying to make sense of it, and that's when I realized there was movement. Someone was out there. I held my breath, watching. The figure didn't knock, didn't call out. They just stood there. Minutes ticked by. My pulse was racing. Finally, I told myself it was nothing, maybe just a trick of the rain and light. I backed away from the door, picked up Molly, and headed back upstairs. But even after I settled back in bed, something didn't feel right. Molly sat up straight, ears pricked, staring again, this time at the bedroom door. I whispered her name, but she wouldn't even look at me. She was fixated. I leaned in, listening. Nothing. Just the storm outside. My nerves were on edge, though, and finally I crouched down, lowering my head to peek under the crack at the bottom of the door. That's when I saw them. A pair of feet, standing just inches away on the other side. I stumbled back so fast I nearly tripped over the corner of the rug. My heart was pounding hard, louder than the rain outside. For a few seconds, I couldn't even process what I'd seen. Feet. Right there, on the other side of the door, like someone had been standing and listening the whole time. I looked at the doorknob. It wasn't even locked. My stomach dropped. With shaking hands, I reached out and snapped the lock down. The sound of the click must have given me away, because the next moment I heard fast footsteps racing down the stairs. The floorboards creaked and thudded under the weight of someone moving quickly. Molly bolted under the bed. I froze, listening as the sound disappeared below. Whoever it was had been inside the house all along. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. My voice shook as I told the dispatcher someone had broken in, that they had been right outside the bedroom door. She told me to stay on the line and lock myself in until officers arrived. I did as she said, pressing my back against the door, as if that thin piece of wood could protect me. The minutes stretched painfully slow. Every creak of the old house, every boom of thunder made me think they were still down there, waiting. I thought of the phone calls earlier, the voice whispering my friend's name. Whoever he was, maybe he thought she'd be home. Maybe he'd been watching the house. Maybe he'd been waiting for her. The dispatcher's calm voice kept me steady until finally, I heard sirens outside. Red and blue lights spilled through the rain-smeared windows. Then, the heavy sound of the front door being pushed open. The police were calling out, moving from room to room. I opened the bedroom door cautiously when one of them called up to me. Molly darted out first, tail puffed up, but I followed with shaky legs. I explained everything, from the phone calls to the moment I saw the feet under the door. They checked the whole house, even outside in the yard, but whoever it was had already vanished. No broken windows, no forced entry. Just gone. One officer suggested it could have been a stalker, someone fixated on my friend. The calls, the way her name was whispered, it all pointed to her, not me. That thought made me sick. The idea that this man knew her, watched her, maybe had been waiting for her to come home. They told me they'd try to trace the calls, but with unknown number, there wasn't much to go on. They'd keep patrols in the area for the next few days. After they left, the house felt emptier than ever, even though I knew it wasn't. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed with the lights on, phone in hand, eyes darting to every shadow. Molly eventually curled up beside me, but even she seemed restless, her ears twitching at the smallest sounds. By morning, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. The world outside looked calm, almost peaceful, but inside I was still shaking. I texted my friend again, this time calling her too, finally reaching her. I told her everything. She was horrified, said she'd never had anything like that happen before. But the more she thought about it, the more unsettled she became. She admitted there had been a guy in one of her classes a while back who made her uncomfortable, someone who had asked too many questions and always seemed to linger. She hadn't seen him recently, but now she was wondering if maybe he had found her address somehow. The thought that he might come back when she returned made both of us uneasy. She asked if I was sure I'd be okay there another night. I lied and said yes, because I didn't want her to worry more than she already was. But deep down, I wasn't sure at all. That evening, I tried to distract myself again, cooking something simple, playing the TV louder than normal, anything to make the silence less heavy. But my nerves were on edge. Every time the phone rang, I jumped. Every gust of wind outside the window made me flinch. When the night came, I locked every door, every window, and double-checked them twice. Molly followed me everywhere, her little paws patting along the floor. She wouldn't stay in one room alone, not even for a minute. I went back upstairs, telling myself over and over that it was just one night, that by tomorrow I'd be back in my own home. I turned on the TV again, climbed into bed, and tried to ignore the storm brewing outside. But around midnight I woke up. Not from the thunder, not from the rain, but from a sound inside the house. A faint creak. Slow, deliberate. I sat up, holding my breath, straining to hear. Molly lifted her head too, ears pointed toward the hallway. The sound came again, closer this time. Someone was upstairs. I held my breath, staring at the bedroom door, every nerve in my body alive with fear. Molly was sitting up straight beside me, her eyes locked on the door as though she could already see what I couldn't. The creaking came again, slow and steady, like someone was moving one careful step at a time. Whoever it was, they weren't in a rush. They were taking their time, and that was somehow worse. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, trying not to make a sound. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped it. I dialed 911 again and whispered into the receiver that someone was in the house. The dispatcher's voice was calm, asking me to describe where I was, but my words were tumbling out too fast, too jumbled. I kept glancing at the doorknob, half expecting it to turn any second. Then the sound shifted. It wasn't footsteps anymore. It was a slow, dragging scrape, like a hand sliding along the wall outside my room. I pressed the phone tight to my ear, my voice barely a whisper as I told the dispatcher what I was hearing. She told me to stay hidden, that officers were already on their way, but every passing second felt like forever. I looked around for something, anything, to defend myself with. My eyes landed on a heavy lamp by the bed. I pulled the cord from the socket and held it tight, the cold ceramic weight almost slipping from my sweaty palms. The noise outside the door stopped. Silence. I strained my ears, but there was nothing now, not even the sound of breathing. I thought maybe they had gone downstairs again, maybe they had left. I wanted to believe that so badly. Then the doorknob rattled. My heart nearly burst from my chest. The knob twisted slowly, testing, as if someone wanted to see if I had left it unlocked. I held the lamp higher, my whole body trembling, whispering into the phone that he was right there, trying to get in. The dispatcher told me again to stay calm, that help was close. But I couldn't hear anything except that faint metal click as the knob was turned back and forth. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. For several minutes, I sat frozen in place, staring at the door, waiting for it to open. Molly had hidden under the bed again, her tail sticking out, twitching like a whip. The silence stretched so long I almost started to believe maybe he had gone. And that's when I heard it. The faintest creak of the closet door sliding open. The sound was behind me, inside the room. I whipped around, my breath catching in my throat. In the dim light of the TV still flickering in the background, I saw the narrow crack of the closet door widening, just an inch, then another. I stumbled back against the wall, lamp raised, my voice shaking as I whispered to the dispatcher that he was in the room. My words came out broken, panicked. She kept asking if I could get out, but I couldn't move. The door slid just enough for me to see it, the outline of a man's face peeking out, pale and motionless, his eyes fixed on me. I dropped the lamp with a crash. Adrenaline surged through me, and I bolted for the bedroom door, yanking it open and sprinting down the hall. I didn't dare look back. I only knew he was there, watching, waiting, and that if I hesitated for even a second, I wouldn't make it out. My feet flew down the stairs, nearly slipping on the wet socks I hadn't even realized I was wearing. The living room blurred past me as I fumbled with the lock on the front door, my shaking hands barely managing to twist it open. The storm hit me full force as I burst outside into the night, phone still clutched in my hand, the dispatcher's voice shouting through the static of rain and wind. I didn't stop running until I was standing in the driveway, drenched, staring back at the dark outline of the house. The lights inside flickered from the TV upstairs, casting faint shadows in the window. I thought I saw movement, just a quick shift, like someone leaning away from view, but I couldn't be sure. Red and blue lights finally cut through the rain, washing over the trees as two police cars pulled up. I waved frantically, pointing to the house, shouting that he was still inside. The officers moved quickly, guns drawn, storming through the front door. I stood shivering in the downpour, every second stretching into an eternity as I waited, half expecting to see him slip out the back and vanish into the woods. But minutes later, they came out dragging him in handcuffs. He looked filthy, oily hair hanging in his face, clothes damp and stained, his eyes wide and unblinking. He didn't fight, didn't say a word. He just stared at me as they shoved him into the back of the car. The officer told me later he had been hiding in the closet for who knows how long, waiting. He made fake job listings online to lure people into giving out their personal information. That was how he got my name, my address, everything. I thought about the hours I had spent in that house, reading, cooking, sleeping, while he was inside, only feet away, listening. The idea made my skin crawl. And even after they took him away, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Because that night wasn't the last time I heard from him. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. I kept staring at it, my mind playing back everything from the night before. The way the closet door had opened. The man's eyes staring at me without blinking. The way he didn't speak a single word as the police dragged him away. It all felt like a nightmare I hadn't fully woken up from. The officer had promised me they'd booked him, that he'd be held for questioning, but their words didn't give me the peace I needed. Because even as they drove off with him, soaked in the rain, he hadn't looked away from me. It wasn't the look of someone defeated. It was the look of someone who knew something I didn't. I tried to move on, to treat it like an awful scare that was finally over. My friend came back from her trip that afternoon, and I told her everything in detail. She looked pale the whole time, her hands shaking as she poured us both some tea. She swore she had no idea who he was, no connection. But then, after a long pause, she admitted she'd been thinking about that man from her class again, the one who lingered after lectures, who asked about her life when she barely knew him. We both sat there in silence, the rain tapping lightly at the windows. Neither of us wanted to say it out loud, but we both knew it could have been him. And if it was, then this wasn't random. I left her house later that day and went back to my own. Walking into my apartment should have felt like relief, but instead it felt fragile, like thin glass I could break with the wrong thought. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum from the fridge made me twitch. I kept the blinds closed, double-checked every lock twice. That night, I told myself I'd finally get some rest. But sleep didn't come easily. I kept replaying the sound of the closet sliding open, imagining him standing there in the dark, just waiting. Eventually, sometime past midnight, I drifted off. I woke up to my phone buzzing on the nightstand. At first I thought it was just a notification, but when I grabbed it, I saw it was a call. Unknown number. I froze, watching the screen vibrate in my hand. The memory of that first weekend came rushing back, the whispered name on the answering machine. My chest tightened. I didn't answer. The call rang out, then stopped. For a moment, the silence was worse. Then it rang again. Same number. My finger hovered over the screen, torn between ending it and picking it up just to scream into the phone. I did neither. I just let it ring until it went quiet again. I sat there in the dark, staring at the phone. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe it was nothing. But then a voicemail came through. My stomach dropped as I tapped it, holding the phone close to my ear. It was just breathing. Slow, steady, heavy breathing. And then, after a long pause, my name. whispered low, almost the same way he had whispered my friends. I nearly dropped the phone. My hand shook so badly I had to set it down on the nightstand. My mind raced with questions. He was supposed to be in custody. How could he be calling me? Was it even him? I hardly slept the rest of the night. Every shadow in the room felt alive. Every sound felt like a warning. The next day, I called the police station, desperate for answers. They told me he had been released. No record of violence, no prior arrests, nothing to hold him on. Just trespassing, they said. Just trespassing. I wanted to scream at them. They hadn't seen the look in his eyes, the way he had been hiding in the closet, the way he had whispered my name. They hadn't felt the fear of knowing someone was in your home, inches from your bed. But none of that mattered. To them, he was just another man they couldn't legally keep. For days after that, I lived on edge. Every unknown call made my stomach twist. Every knock at the door made me freeze. I stopped going out at night. I kept the lights on even when I tried to sleep. And then it escalated. One evening, just as the sun was setting, I looked out my window and saw him. Standing across the street, still and quiet, like he had all the time in the world. He wasn't trying to hide. He wanted me to see him. His face was half covered by his greasy hair, his clothes the same dirty ones from before. He stood there for almost 10 minutes, not moving, not waving, just staring. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. I didn't follow. I didn't even move from the window until long after he was gone. But I knew then what he was trying to say. He wasn't done with me. And I couldn't tell if anyone was going to stop him. I couldn't stop replaying that image in my mind, him standing across the street, silent, watching me from the shadows of the evening. He hadn't yelled, hadn't moved, hadn't even tried to come closer. Somehow, that made it worse. He didn't need to. Just being there, making sure I saw him, was enough to plant the fear deep inside me. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined hearing footsteps in the hall, or the closet door sliding open again. I kept jolting awake, heart racing, gasping for air. By morning, my body felt like it had run a marathon. I tried to convince myself it couldn't go on like this forever. Maybe he'd get bored, maybe he'd move on. But then the phone calls started again. Always. Unknown number. Always silence on the other end, or worse, that quiet breathing. Sometimes I thought I heard a whisper, my name or my friend's name, barely audible. I stopped answering altogether, but the ringing itself was enough to shake me. I reported everything, of course. I told the police about the calls, about seeing him outside. They sent a patrol car a couple of times, but by the time anyone came, he was long gone. They always told me the same thing. Without proof of a crime, there was nothing more they could do. It was around this time that I started noticing small things out of place in my apartment. A chair slightly pulled back from the table when I was sure I hadn't moved it. My keys not exactly where I remembered leaving them. At first, I thought it was just my paranoia, the exhaustion playing tricks on me. But then I found the photo. It was a picture of me, taken from outside my window. I was sitting on my couch in the living room, reading a book. The blinds had been halfway open that night. I remembered it clearly. The photo had been slid under my front door, folded in half. I didn't even have the strength to scream. I just sat there staring at it, my hands shaking so violently I almost ripped the paper in two. He had been outside, close enough to see me, to watch me without me knowing. I called the police again, shoving the photo into an envelope for them to take. This time, they seemed more serious. They said they'd look into it, that they'd increase patrols in my area. But the words felt empty. because when the officers left, I was still the one locking the doors, drawing the blinds, and sitting in silence, waiting for the next move. Days passed like that, every one of them heavier than the last. My friend called often, checking in, apologizing for dragging me into this by asking me to watch her cat. I kept telling her it wasn't her fault, even though deep down I wasn't so sure. If he really had been after her, then I was just the one who answered the door first. Then came the night of the storm. The rain had started early in the evening, the sky heavy and dark, thunder rolling every few minutes. I was curled up on the couch, every light in the apartment blazing, when I heard it, the faint rumble of an engine. I walked slowly to the window, careful not to be seen, and peeked through the blinds. Through the sheets of rain, I saw the glow of a headlight. A motorcycle, creeping down the road, pulling up across from my building. My heart hammered. It was him, I just knew it. The engine cut off. The headlight flicked out. Suddenly there was nothing but darkness and rain. I pressed my face closer to the glass, searching, straining to see. But there was nothing. Just shadows and water. Minutes passed. Then I heard it, muddy footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate, circling the building. I couldn't see him, but I could hear him. Every splash in the puddles sent a chill racing up my spine. I grabbed the phone again, called 911, whispering to the dispatcher that he was outside. She told me to stay put, that help was on the way, but I couldn't stay calm. I was pacing the room, glancing from window to window, terrified of what I might see staring back. And then I did. Through the crack in the blinds, I caught a glimpse of him standing just beyond the glow of the street lamp. Drenched in black clothing, his helmet hanging from one hand, something long and heavy glinting in the other. At first, I couldn't tell what it was. Then the lightning flashed, and I saw it clearly. A hammer. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't even trying to hide. He was just watching, like always. I backed away from the window, pressing myself against the wall, whispering into the phone that he was armed, that he was right outside. My whole body was trembling so hard I could barely speak. The dispatcher kept telling me to lock myself in, but I couldn't just sit there anymore. Something snapped inside me. Maybe it was the weeks of fear, the endless calls, the photo under my door. Maybe it was just that I couldn't take another second of being hunted. I ran to the garage, fumbling with the keys, my breath ragged. My car was parked inside. I got in, turned the ignition, and with shaking hands I hit the button to raise the door. The storm slammed against me as the garage opened, and for one awful second, I thought I'd see him standing right there, waiting. But there was nothing. Just the rain. I pulled out fast, tires skidding on the wet pavement, and spun the car around to face my apartment. I hit the high beams, flooding the building with light. And there he was, standing inches from my window, hammer raised, peering inside like he was about to strike. The light caught him full in the face, and he froze. For the first time, I think I saw fear in his eyes. For a moment, time stopped. The rain hammered on the roof of the car, thunder cracked somewhere far off, and all I could see was him standing there in the glare of my headlights. His greasy hair clung to his face, his clothes were soaked through, and his hand gripped the hammer so tight his knuckles were pale. He didn't move. Neither did I. I sat frozen behind the wheel, both hands clutching the steering wheel so hard it hurt. My heart was pounding against my ribs, my breath fogging the windshield despite the defroster blasting. He stared at me, squinting against the bright beams, and for the first time I felt like maybe he hadn't expected me to fight back, not like this. The silence broke when he lowered the hammer, not dropping it, but letting it hang loosely at his side. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes never left mine. He tilted his head slightly, almost like he was studying me, like I was the one trapped now. Then, just as quickly, he turned and sprinted into the darkness, his figure swallowed up by the rain. I didn't chase him. My body wouldn't let me. Instead, I sat there shaking, headlights still locked on the window he'd been about to break into. Every nerve in me screamed that he was still out there, watching from somewhere I couldn't see. It took everything in me to grab my phone again. I called 911, my voice breaking as I told them he was armed, that he'd almost come inside. They told me to stay put, officers were already on their way. I stayed in the car, engine running, lights flooding the building like a shield. When the cruisers finally pulled up, red and blue flashing across the wet pavement, I felt my chest loosen just enough to breathe again. I got out, soaked immediately by the rain, and ran to meet them, pointing toward the woods where he'd vanished. The officers fanned out with flashlights, combing the area, but after 20 minutes of searching, they came back shaking their heads. He was gone. They took my statement again, asked the same questions they always did. What did he look like? What did he say? How long was he there? I gave them everything I could, but it all felt useless. They promised to file another report, promised to increase surveillance. But I'd heard it before. Promises hadn't stopped him from showing up again and again. That night, I didn't go back inside. I couldn't. I followed the police to the station and sat there for hours, drenched and shivering, giving them every detail again, while my mind replayed the image of him at my window. Eventually, they let me go. I drove to my parents' place 2 towns over, too scared to even think about being alone. For the first time in weeks, I slept. Not deeply, not peacefully, but I slept. And in the morning, I woke up to sunlight instead of rain, to my mom making coffee in the kitchen, to the sound of something normal again. For a few precious moments, it felt like maybe I had escaped. But fear doesn't vanish overnight. Every creak in the house made me flinch. Every time the phone rang, I tensed. I kept checking the windows, expecting to see him there, hammer in hand. My parents tried to reassure me, telling me I was safe, that he couldn't follow me everywhere. But I wasn't so sure. A week passed without incident. No calls. No sightings. No photos slipped under the door. Slowly, I began to let myself believe maybe he was gone. Maybe the police presence had scared him off. Maybe he had finally decided to stop. And then, one evening, as I was leaving my parents' driveway to run a quick errand, I saw it. A motorcycle parked at the far end of the street, half hidden behind a row of trees. My stomach dropped. The rider wasn't moving. He sat there still as a statue, helmet on, body angled just enough toward me that I knew he was looking. I froze in my car, fingers tight on the steering wheel, trying to convince myself it wasn't him, that it could be anyone. But deep down, I already knew. We stayed locked like that for what felt like forever. I could barely breathe, terrified that if I moved, if I blinked, he'd come charging forward. But then, without a sound, he revved the engine once and slowly pulled away, disappearing down the road. I sat there shaking, the weight of it crashing down on me all over again. He knew where I was. He'd found me, even here. When I told the police, they gave me the same tired lines. They'd investigate, they'd keep watch. But unless he did something, their hands were tied. To them, it was just a man on a motorcycle. To me, it was proof he wasn't letting go. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, every nerve in my body raw. I kept thinking about the look on his face when the headlights hit him, the way he hadn't run right away, the way he wanted me to see him. It wasn't about breaking in anymore. It wasn't about catching me off guard. It was about control. About reminding me that no matter where I went, he could find me. And I knew then that this wasn't going to stop on its own. One way or another, it would have to end. The decision didn't come suddenly. It crept in over the days that followed, each moment of silence on the phone, each glance at the window, each shadow that made me freeze. I couldn't live like this anymore. He had taken over my life without even stepping inside again. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized he was never going to stop. Not until he got what he wanted. I had two choices: keep waiting for him to make his move, or make mine first. I began preparing quietly, without telling anyone. I changed the locks, bought cameras for the windows and doors, set up motion detectors in the hallway. I didn't sleep in my bedroom anymore. I slept in the living room, close to the front door, where I could hear if anyone tried to come inside. My parents begged me to stay with them, but I told them I needed to face this on my own. Deep down, I think they knew I was right. The rain came back one night, heavy and relentless. The kind of storm that makes the world outside vanish into a blur of gray. I sat awake in the living room, the glow of the lamp washing over the furniture, the cameras feeding quietly into my phone. Midnight came and went. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the ticking of the wall clock. Then the alert came. A motion notification lit up my phone. Backyard camera. I swiped it open with trembling hands, and there he was, silhouetted against the rain, standing just outside the back door. He had the hammer again. For a moment I couldn't move. I could only watch the grainy black and white footage of him standing there, soaked, his head tilted up toward the camera as if he knew I was watching. He raised the hammer slowly, tapped it against the door, once, twice, and then lowered it again. I dialed 911 immediately, whispering to the dispatcher that he was back, that he was armed. She promised units were on the way, but I didn't believe they'd be fast enough. Not this time. The tapping stopped. Silence. Then I heard it, the sound of the back door handle turning. He was trying to get in. I grabbed the shotgun from the corner, the one I had bought weeks ago but never thought I'd actually use. My hands shook so badly I could barely load it, but I managed. I pressed myself against the wall near the front door, breath shallow, waiting. The handle rattled again, harder this time. Then a loud bang. The hammer striking the door. Wood splintered, the sound echoing through the house. Another bang, louder. The frame groaned. He was breaking through. I raised the shotgun, heart pounding in my ears, and aimed toward the back of the house. My whole body screamed to run, but I stayed rooted, knowing there was no more running from him. The final strike sent the door bursting inward. He stepped into the house, dripping with rain, hammer in hand. His eyes locked onto mine instantly, wide and crazed, a twisted smile spreading across his face as if this was what he had wanted all along. I shouted at him to stop, to leave, my voice cracking with fear. He took a step forward instead, raising the hammer. I fired. The blast rang through the house, deafening. He stumbled back, the hammer clattering to the floor, his body crumpling against the broken doorframe. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The gun felt impossibly heavy in my hands, the smell of gunpowder filling the air. Then the sirens came, flashing red and blue through the rain. Officers poured in moments later, pulling me aside, checking me over as others surrounded his motionless body. It was over. Or at least, that's what they told me. In the days that followed, I felt hollow, like I'd been emptied out. Everyone said I did what I had to, that I defended myself, that it was justified. But when I closed my eyes at night, all I could see was the moment our eyes locked, the way he smiled before stepping forward. I kept wondering what he had wanted from the very beginning. Why me? Why my friend? Why her house, that storm, that weekend? The police never gave me answers. They found nothing useful in his apartment, nothing that explained the obsession. Just notebooks filled with scribbles, job listings he'd posted, fragments of names and numbers. No clear reason. No closure. Sometimes, I think that's the cruelest part. You survive the fear, you survive the night, but the questions stay. And so does the silence that comes after. The silence where you realize the world doesn't go back to the way it was. I still check my windows every night. I still jump when the phone rings and doesn't show a name. And on stormy nights, when the rain pounds against the glass, I catch myself staring into the blur outside, half expecting to see him standing there again. Even though I know he won't. Because I was the one who ended it. And sometimes, I'm not sure if that makes me feel safe, or haunted forever.